William Shatner gave generations more than Captain Kirk. He gave them the courage to believe the horizon was never the end. Across 7 decades, his voice traveled through television, Broadway, books, music, and even space. Yet fame left one wound no award could heal: the years his work had taken from his family. And now, at 95, he is looking back on a private chapter that reopened that regret. 3 years earlier, one late-night call had sent the 92-year-old Shatner to a loved one's home in about 15 minutes. What could make an aging father move with such urgency? And why did his journey into space return him to Earth carrying sorrow instead of triumph? Before we begin, honor William Shatner with a like, a tribute to the man who learned that the shortest journey can reveal the deepest love. Long before millions recognized the voice of Captain Kirk, William Shatner was a quiet boy growing up in Montreal, uncertain of where he belonged. Born in 1931, he was raised in a Jewish family with deep immigrant roots alongside his sisters, Joy and Farla, in the neighborhood of Notre-Dame-de-Grâce. His father, Joseph, worked in the garment business, while his mother, Anne, managed the demands of family life and encouraged her son's early interest in performance. The household was modest, and money required care. Shatner would later describe himself as a lonely child, a recollection that gives his earliest years their deepest emotional truth. He was surrounded by family, yet he often felt apart from the world around him. That sense of isolation did not announce the man he would become. It simply remained with him until he discovered a place where his voice could reach beyond the walls of home. That place was the stage. At 6 or 7, Shatner began attending acting classes held in a basement. By 8, he was performing with the Montreal Children's Theatre, and by 10, he was working before a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation microphone. These were modest beginnings, far removed from Hollywood or the bridge of the enterprise. Yet they offered him a form of recognition he had rarely felt elsewhere. Acting gave structure to emotions he could not always explain. Radio taught him that a voice could travel far beyond the person speaking. Theater showed him that an audience might listen closely when ordinary life had made him feel unnoticed. One summer at a B'nai B'rith camp revealed that this emerging confidence could also be used for someone else. There, Shatner met Fred Bild, a teenage Holocaust survivor who had recently arrived in Canada and spoke little English. According to Bild's later recollection, William patiently helped him practice words, worked with him privately, and encouraged him to take part in a camp production. Within several weeks, Bild had gained enough confidence to speak more freely. Decades later, he remembered Shatner as one of the most important people in his early Canadian life. They never reunited, and Shatner never heard the full weight of that gratitude. Before fame gave him a worldwide audience, he had already learned that helping another person find a voice could change the direction of a life. In 1948, Shatner entered McGill University to study commerce, following a path that promised greater security than acting. Yet his strongest commitment remained with performance. He became deeply involved in the Players Club, the radio workshop, and the Red and White Review, taking on responsibilities in acting, writing, producing, and directing. He later joked about his uneven attendance in class, but he spoke seriously about what the theater gave him, calling it his real education. Those university years taught him how to command a stage, carry a story, and transform nervous energy into presence. They also placed him before a difficult choice. Commerce offered a respectable future. Acting offered uncertainty, rejection, and no promise of stability. When he graduated in 1952 with a Bachelor of Commerce, he possessed the degree his family could trust, but he also understood where his deepest commitment lay. Hollywood had not yet called. Captain Kirk did not yet exist. What did exist was a young man shaped by loneliness, strengthened by performance, and increasingly certain that words could cross distances ordinary conversation could not. The commanding voice the world would later recognize was first formed in Montreal through children's theater, radio microphones, university stages, and one quiet act of kindness toward another young person struggling to be heard. After graduating from McGill in 1952, William Shatner entered a profession that offered no promise of stability. He began working with the Canadian National Repertory Theatre before joining the Stratford Shakespearean Festival, where classical theatre demanded discipline, physical control, and the ability to hold an audience without the protection of a camera. He performed in productions including Measure for Measure, Julius Caesar, The Taming of the Shrew, and The Merchant of Venice, learning beside actors whose names carried greater weight than his own. The work was demanding, but recognition remained uncertain. Every role had to be earned again, and one successful performance offered no guarantee that another would follow. For a young actor trying to build a life from the stage, persistence mattered as much as talent. Broadway brought ambition and humiliation in equal measure. In January 1956, Tamburlaine the Great opened with Shatner in the cast, only to close after 20 performances. The production that might have established him in New York disappeared in less than 3 weeks. Its closing left him with no certainty that the next opportunity would arrive. He returned to Stratford and continued working, still positioned beneath performers whose careers appeared more secure. Then Christopher Plummer was unable to perform Henry V after suffering from kidney stones, and Shatner was asked to take his place. He had approximately 3 hours to prepare. There was no gradual rehearsal period, and no time to wait for confidence. He had to enter the stage carrying the responsibility of an entire production before fear could persuade him to retreat. Shatner later laughed at the memory, saying, "I would never do that now. Are you kidding me?" Yet the humor came years after the danger had passed. That night, he stepped into the light and carried the role. Plummer later remembered recognizing that Shatner possessed the force of a future star. The performance did not suddenly make his career secure. Shatner continued moving between theater and American television, accepting roles in programs including Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Defenders, and The Outer Limits. Television gave him a different kind of test. The camera magnified hesitation, fear, and the smallest change in expression. In the Twilight Zone episode, Nick of Time, he played a man gradually surrendering his judgment to superstition. In Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, he became a passenger who sees a danger no one else believes is real. The role demanded that he hold the audience inside one man's isolation, while every character around him questioned his sanity. These performances revealed an intensity that would later become inseparable from his public image. The ability to make fear visible while still fighting to remain in control. By the middle of the 1960s, Shatner had survived canceled productions, uncertain employment, supporting roles, and nights when another actor's misfortune became his only opportunity. Stratford had taught him to command a stage. Broadway had shown him how quickly a dream could disappear. Television had taught him to place private terror directly before the camera. He was no longer the inexperienced graduate searching for permission to become an actor. He had become a performer capable of making audiences believe that a single man could stand against doubt, danger, and isolation. Soon, Captain James T. Kirk would give that quality a name recognized around the world. Yet the role would also create a new struggle. After spending years fighting to be seen, William Shatner was about to become so closely identified with one character that the man behind the captain's chair might disappear again. Star Trek had already come close to disappearing before William Shatner stepped onto the bridge of the Enterprise in 1966. NBC had rejected the original pilot, and the project survived only because the network granted its creators a rare second opportunity. Shatner was 35, carrying years of Shakespearean training, Broadway disappointment, and television work that could vanish without warning. The sets were modest, many of the controls were painted, and much of the universe existed only in the imagination of the cast. Yet Shatner gave Captain James T. Kirk enough authority, warmth, and urgency to make that fragile world believable. Production days were long, the pressure was relentless, and his forceful working style sometimes complicated relationships with other cast members. Still, the series imagined a future in which people of different races, nationalities, and cultures worked together as an ordinary fact of life. In the 1968 episode, Plato's Stepchildren, Shatner and Nichelle Nichols shared one of the earliest and most remembered interracial kisses on American television. For viewers living through a decade of division and uncertainty, the Enterprise offered a future that looked less frightened than the present. Then NBC canceled Star Trek in 1969 after only 3 seasons. Shatner was 38. Millions knew his face. Yet Hollywood increasingly saw Captain Kirk whenever it looked at William Shatner. The role that had finally made him visible now threatened to hide every other actor he might become. Time changed the verdict. Star Trek reruns gathered a passionate audience. Conventions revealed that the canceled series had become a cultural phenomenon. And in 1979, Shatner returned to the Enterprise for Star Trek, the motion picture. Kirk was no longer the role that had ended too soon. He had become a character audiences were willing to follow into middle age. The films kept Shatner tied to the captain, but television gave him another way out of the typecasting he had feared. In 1982, at 51, he became the veteran police officer at the center of T.J. Hooker, trading a starship for patrol streets and proving that a weekly American audience would accept him without a Starfleet uniform. Later, as host of Rescue 911, his unmistakable voice entered millions of homes through dramatized stories of ordinary people facing emergencies. The contrast was striking. Captain Kirk had confronted danger in imagined galaxies. Now Shatner was introducing stories built around real families, split-second decisions, and survival. He also directed, wrote books, recorded music, and kept finding new uses for the familiarity audiences already had with him. Kirk remained part of his identity, but no longer had to contain all of it. The most surprising reinvention arrived when many actors his age would already have been looking backward. As the extravagant, aging attorney Denny Crane on The Practice and Boston Legal, Shatner turned vanity, humor, fear, friendship, and the indignities of growing older into one of the defining performances of his later career. The role earned him 2 Emmy Awards and gave a new generation a William Shatner who had almost nothing to do with the bridge of the Enterprise. By then, different Americans could remember him through entirely different doors. Some first saw Captain Kirk. Others grew up with T.J. Hooker. Families remembered the voice of Rescue 911. Later viewers knew the swaggering declaration of Denny Crane. The man who once feared that one character had swallowed his identity had somehow lived long enough to become several kinds of television memory. While his public life kept expanding, the private regret following him became smaller and more specific. Dinners missed, daughters growing, ordinary evenings surrendered because another production needed him somewhere else. Shatner had escaped the shadow of one role. He could not reclaim the hours his family had already lived without him. In 1956, William Shatner married Canadian actress Gloria Rand as his professional life was beginning to demand more of him. Their first daughter, Leslie, was born in 1958, followed by Elizabeth in 1961 and Melanie in 1964. During those years, Shatner was still an actor without lasting security. A production could close, a television role could end, and recognition offered no guarantee that another paycheck would follow. That uncertainty remained with him, even as his career gained momentum. When work appeared, he accepted it. When filming schedules expanded, he stayed. The profession that was supposed to provide stability for his family gradually consumed more of the time in which that family was growing. The pressure intensified after Star Trek began production in 1966. Shatner later acknowledged that the series took him away from an extraordinary number of family dinners during its 3 seasons. Each absence represented an evening on the childhood of Leslie, Elizabeth, and Melanie that could not be repeated. Outside the home, audiences were learning to trust Captain Kirk as the man who remained present during every emergency. Inside Shatner's own life, birthdays, school days, illnesses, celebrations, and ordinary family routines continued whether filming had ended or not. He brought his daughters to sets and sometimes traveled long distances to spend limited time with them, but brief returns could not slow the passage of their childhood. Gloria and the girls experienced the daily rhythm of family life, while Shatner often encountered it in the spaces left between rehearsals, production days, and professional travel. By 1969, the year NBC canceled Star Trek, the marriage had also reached its end. Shatner was 38, publicly recognized and privately facing the collapse of the home he had believed his work was helping to protect. Decades later, he described the marriage as lopsided and admitted, "I wasn't good at being married." The statement did not attempt to rewrite the past. Gloria had lived through the most demanding years of his early career while raising their 3 daughters, and Shatner had allowed professional fear and ambition to occupy too much of the life they were building together. Their divorce did not end his bond with Leslie, Elizabeth, and Melanie. The daughters remained part of his life and stayed connected to him as adults. Yet later closeness could not return them to the ages they had been when he was absent. That regret became one of the quietest burdens beneath Shatner's success. He kept calling, visiting, and trying to become more present. But the past offered no route back to an evening already missed, or a childhood moment already gone. Captain Kirk was built to reach a threatened world before time ran out. William Shatner had only one direction left: forward, hoping that if one of his daughters ever called him from a moment of real fear, he would still have the chance to answer and arrive before it was too late. William Shatner met actress Marcy Lafferty in 1970 while they were working on the Andersonville trial. 3 years later, when Shatner was 42, they married. Marcy was the daughter of television producer Perry Lafferty and had built a career of her own as an actress. Their relationship developed during a period when Shatner was rebuilding his personal life after the end of his first marriage and continuing to search for stability beyond Captain Kirk. One of the strongest connections between them was their shared love of horses. Together, they became involved with American saddlebreds, spending years breeding, training, showing, and traveling with the animals. The equestrian world gave them a part of life that existed beyond studios, scripts, and the pressures attached to Shatner's public identity. Their marriage continued through much of Shatner's middle age and several important stages of his career. Marcy appeared in a number of projects connected to him, including Star Trek, the motion picture, and episodes of TJ Hooker. Their years together also included extensive travel, professional commitments, and the routines built around their horses. They had no children together, but their marriage lasted 23 years, making it the longest formal marriage of Shatner's life at that time. In 1996, when Shatner was 65, the marriage ended in divorce. The separation did not become a prolonged public conflict, and neither person built the ending around public accusations. Shatner later recalled Marcy's conclusion in simple terms: "Life took us apart, and it was time to move on." The sentence offered little drama and no clear villain. It marked the end of a relationship that had occupied nearly a quarter-century of their lives. Marcy shared years of work, travel, horses, and professional change with him. Their marriage deserves to be remembered for that substantial chapter, rather than treated only as a passage between the more painful events that followed. Leonard Nimoy recognized the seriousness of Noreen Kidd's condition before William Shatner was ready to step away from the relationship. In 1997, Shatner was 66 when he married Noreen, then 38, whom he later called his soulmate. She was living with severe alcohol dependence, an illness Nimoy understood from his own experience. He encouraged Noreen to seek treatment and warned Shatner about the uncertainty ahead. Shatner's response was direct: "But I love her." He later acknowledged that he had married her despite serious concerns, still hoping that love, patience, and professional help might lead them toward recovery. Their life together was shaped by affection, repeated worry, and the limits of what one person could do for another facing a powerful illness. On August 9, 1999, Shatner returned to their Studio City home at about 10 o'clock that night and found Noreen in the backyard pool. She was 40. He pulled her from the water and attempted to revive her, but she could not be saved. The coroner ruled her passing accidental, and toxicology findings included alcohol and diazepam. Soon afterward, Shatner described Noreen as his beautiful soulmate and spoke publicly about alcohol dependence as a disease, urging people to respond with compassion rather than shame. His later recollections revealed how deeply the loss remained with him. He remembered traveling to Kentucky without fully understanding why, moving past people as though he could barely register their presence, and then suddenly breaking down in tears. 5 years later, that memory entered his music. On the 2004 album Has Been, Shatner performed What Have You Done?, a sparse spoken piece connected to the night Noreen died. The recording carried the pauses and strain of a memory he had continued to live with. He did not turn the experience into a conventional song of resolution, because the event itself offered none. In the years that followed, Shatner supported recovery efforts and used Noreen's name to assist women seeking treatment for alcohol dependence. Speaking about the illness did not alter what had happened, but it allowed her story to be associated with compassion and help rather than judgment alone. The night he lost Noreen was beyond changing. What remained was the choice of how her struggle would be remembered. In 2001, about 18 months after the loss of Noreen Kidd, William Shatner married Elizabeth Anderson Martin. Elizabeth understood a part of his life that existed far beyond acting. She was an accomplished horse trainer, and their shared devotion to horses became central to the years they spent together. They bred American saddlebreds, traveled, attended equestrian events, and built daily routines around the animals they both loved. Their partnership also entered Shatner's creative work. In 2004, they co-wrote together for his album Has Been, leaving behind a personal record of the companionship they had found. Their marriage lasted 18 years, carrying Shatner through a period of renewed professional success and into the later decades of his life. In 2019, Shatner filed for divorce, and the settlement was finalized in 2020. Their homes, horses, and shared interests were divided through legal documents. The separation remained largely free of public attacks. Shatner later explained that the reasons for the divorce were practical and did not arise from personal dislike. That distinction became important because their connection continued after the legal marriage had ended. They began appearing together publicly again, and Shatner sometimes referred to Elizabeth as his wife, even though they had not formally remarried. In a March 2024 interview, Shatner revealed that he and Elizabeth were living together again. "We've, in effect, remarried," he said, while making clear that they had held no second ceremony. He described the relationship through the language of partnership than spectacle. "We help each other with our lives." He also called Elizabeth the zest of life, crediting her with bringing energy and companionship into his later years. Their reunion did not require Shatner to deny the divorce or turn it into a dramatic reversal. He acknowledged that practical problems separated them, and that both understood those problems more clearly now. Elizabeth's place in Shatner's story, therefore, extends beyond the dates of their marriage. She shared his equestrian life, contributed to his music, remained connected to him after their divorce, and later returned to the same home without the need for another public ceremony. As Shatner entered his 90s, their relationship was no longer being presented as a promise of perfection. In his own account, it had become a working partnership between two people who knew each other's routines, histories, and needs, and who had chosen to share daily life again. A special effects explosion during the filming of the Star Trek episode Arena left William Shatner with a burden that continued long after the cameras stopped. Standing too close to the blast, he developed permanent tinnitus, an internal ringing and hissing no one around him could hear. He later remembered becoming fully aware of it while sitting on a beach. One receding wave seemed to continue after the next had already arrived, and slowly he understood that the sound was not coming from the ocean at all. It was inside his own ears. At times, his mind pushed it far enough into the background for daily life to continue. At others, the noise returned with enough force to invade even quiet moments. Habituation therapy eventually helped him adjust, though it could not restore the silence he had lost. Shatner later supported tinnitus research and awareness, using one of television's most recognizable voices to speak for people living with a condition no one else can hear. Age brought stiffness, swollen joints, and a body that demanded more patience than the one that had once carried him through stage fights, punishing production days, and horseback riding without much thought. He still rode, wrote, recorded, exercised, and appeared before audiences. Pain changed his pace. It did not end his appetite for the world. A far more serious test entered the family in July 2022. Shatner's youngest daughter, Melanie, discovered a small lump beneath her breast only months after a mammogram had appeared clear. When the first imaging examination did not reveal anything alarming, she asked that the precise area be checked again. Further testing showed HER2-positive stage 4 breast cancer that had spread to lymph nodes in her chest. The next year and a half would bring chemotherapy with HER2-targeted treatment, a double mastectomy, and radiation. Shatner later said he was devastated. When Melanie worried about the cost of care, he told her to send the medical bills to him and use her strength for recovery. He also kept trying to make her laugh, offering the one thing a frightened father could still give when medicine belonged to the doctors. Then, while Melanie was still inside treatment, a lump appeared on Shatner's cheek. His family doctor initially thought it was a blocked salivary gland, but the growth kept increasing. About a month later, a plastic surgeon friend examined his face and urged him to have it removed. In June 2023, at 92, Shatner learned that the mass was stage 4 malignant melanoma. The disease had reached his lungs and brain. He underwent surgery to remove the facial tumor, followed by immunotherapy directed at the remaining disease. For a time, father and daughter were living inside overlapping stage 4 cancer treatments. Melanie was already carrying the exhaustion and uncertainty of her own illness when she learned that her father was also facing advanced cancer. She later remembered wondering whether she had enough strength to keep fighting for herself while confronting the possibility of losing him. Shatner continued working and making public appearances, still carrying the familiar humor and commanding voice audiences had known for decades. At home, the picture was quieter. Melanie, her husband, Joel, and other relatives brought him meals, watched films beside him, and made sure treatment did not leave him isolated. The direction of care had begun to turn. The daughter whose childhood had continued through so many of her father's absences was now helping care for him, while Shatner remained deeply worried about the illness moving through her body. Neither could remove the other person's disease. Neither could promise what the next scan would show. They could keep showing up. That simple act would soon return Shatner to one of the oldest regrets of his life. All the years when work had made being present far more difficult than it should have been. On October 13, 2021, William Shatner entered the place that had followed him through most of his adult life. At 90, he boarded Blue Origin's New Shepard and rose beyond Earth's atmosphere. For more than half a century, audiences had connected his face with Captain Kirk and the promise of discovery. Shatner expected fulfillment. Instead, the blackness beyond the window unsettled him. Against it, Earth appeared thin, exposed, and painfully alive. He later compared the experience to a funeral. The voyage did not leave him longing for a farther world. It sent him home with a sharper awareness that this planet, and every life upon it, could be lost. Returning to Earth also meant returning to absence. Leonard Nimoy, whose Spock had stood beside Kirk for decades, was gone. DeForest Kelley was gone. Noreen Kidd, the wife he had once called his soulmate, remained part of a grief time had changed without erasing. At 95, Shatner belongs to a generation whose familiar voices have grown fewer. He still writes, records, speaks before audiences, and remains curious about a world he once pretended to explore from a television set. The spaceflight showed him the fragility of the world. Age showed him the fragility of time between people. That truth became painfully personal during Melanie's chemotherapy. One night, overwhelmed by fear and the physical toll of treatment, his youngest daughter called and said, "I think I'm dying." Years earlier, work had taken William away from countless family dinners. On this night, the distance between father and daughter lasted only minutes. About 15 minutes after the call, the 92-year-old Shatner was outside her home. Melanie came into his arms and received what she later remembered as a daddy bear hug. He could not remove the illness or promise what morning would bring. He could be there. For a father who had spent decades understanding the cost of missed time, presence became the answer he was finally able to give. The moment did not restore the birthdays, dinners, and ordinary evenings lost during his busiest years. It gave the regret a different ending. The captain who had always reached the crisis before time ran out had become an aging father who simply reached his daughter when she was most afraid. Melanie later said that when she told him she was cancer-free, it was only the third time in her life that she had heard her father cry. By late 2024, both father and daughter had been declared free of cancer. Their recovery had required demanding treatment, skilled physicians, and the daily care of a family that learned how much strength can exist in simply staying close. In July 26, Shatner and Melanie turned that private ordeal outward with the video podcast No Time But Now, speaking together about illness, resilience, longevity, and the choices people make when time begins to feel more precious. The father who once struggled to balance work and family was now working beside the daughter, whose childhood had unfolded through so many of his absences. Yet the clearest measure of his present life may still be found away from microphones and stages. He has spoken about Sunday dinners that gather children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren around the same table. The crowded room carries an echo of the evenings his career once took him away from. Those earlier nights cannot be recovered. The table before him is full. Captain Kirk, T.J. Hooker, Denny Crane, the Enterprise, the Emmy Awards, and the flight beyond Earth will remain in public memory. His quieter legacy lives closer to home. In a daughter remembering that her father came when she called, in a family still gathering, and in an old man listening while several generations speak across the same table. William Shatner spent a lifetime traveling toward distant horizons. The journey that revealed him most clearly covered only the distance to his daughter's door. If Captain Kirk, Denny Crane, or William Shatner's unmistakable voice has remained part of your life, share the memory you still carry.